The crystal chandelier above the dining table cast prismatic shadows across the white tablecloth, and I remember thinking how beautiful everything looked, how deceptively perfect. I sat between my boyfriend Marcus and his younger sister Emily, my hands folded in my lap, trying to ignore the way Marcus's father, Richard Thornton, had been staring at me since I'd arrived at their estate in Greenwich. I'd been dating Marcus for 18 months, and this was only the third time I'd been invited to his family home. The first two visits had been brief, cordial affairs, coffee in the afternoon, never a full meal, but tonight was different. Tonight, Richard had insisted on a formal dinner. Marcus had been nervous all week, though he wouldn't tell me why. So, Natalie, Richard began, swirling his wine glass with the practiced ease of someone who'd been born into wealth. Marcus tells us you work in event planning. Yes, sir, I replied, keeping my voice steady. According to YouTube analytics, 99% of viewers are not subscribed. That's a huge number. By subscribing the channel that is completely free, you'll help support the channel and never miss fresh content. I'm a senior coordinator at Prestige Events. We handle corporate functions, galas, weddings. Weddings, he interrupted, a slight smile playing at his lips. How quaint. And before that, Marcus mentioned something about you growing up in, where was it? The Bronx? The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Marcus's mother, Catherine, set down her fork with a soft clink. Emily's eyes darted between her father and me. Yes, sir. I grew up in the South Bronx. My mother raised me and my two brothers on her own, after my father passed away when I was 7. Richard nodded slowly, as if I'd just confirmed something he'd suspected. I see. And your mother, what does she do? She's a nurse at Lincoln Hospital. She's worked there for 26 years. How noble! The word dripped from his mouth like poison coated in honey. Marcus, you never mentioned that your girlfriend came from such humble beginnings. Marcus's jaw tightened. Dad, I don't think... No, let me finish. Richard leaned forward, his eyes locked on mine. You see, Natalie, the Thornton family has a certain reputation to uphold. My grandfather built Thornton Industries from the ground up, and we've maintained our position in society through careful choices, careful alliances. Do you understand what I'm saying? My heart was hammering, but I kept my expression neutral. I'm not sure I do, sir. Then let me be clearer. He set down his wine glass with deliberate precision. My son is the heir to a considerable fortune. He will one day lead a company worth over $3 billion. He will need a wife who understands that world, who was raised in it, who knows how to navigate society at that level. Not someone from... He paused, his lips curling into something that wasn't quite a smile. Not someone who crawled out of the projects like street garbage. The silence that followed was deafening. Catherine gasped. Emily's mouth fell open. Marcus shot to his feet, his chair scraping violently against the hardwood floor. Dad, what the hell? But I barely heard him. The words street garbage echoed in my head. And for a moment, I was 7 years old again, standing in our tiny apartment, watching my mother count coins to see if we could afford milk that week. I was 12, wearing my cousin's hand-me-downs to school while other kids whispered. I was 16, working the night shift at a diner to help pay our rent while maintaining straight A's. Street garbage. I stood slowly, my legs somehow steady despite the trembling that had started in my chest. I looked Richard Thornton directly in the eye. Thank you for dinner, Mr. Thornton, and thank you for showing me exactly who you are. I turned to Marcus, whose face had gone pale. I need to leave. Nat, wait. He grabbed my hand, but I gently pulled away. I'm not angry at you, Marcus, but I need to go, now. I walked out of that house with my head high, even though tears were streaming down my face by the time I reached my car. I drove to my small apartment in Queens, went inside, and finally allowed myself to break down. Not just from the humiliation, I'd faced worse prejudice before, but from the realization that I'd been naive enough to think love could bridge worlds that some people would never let connect. Marcus called 16 times that night. I didn't answer. By morning, there were 43 text messages, each one more desperate than the last. Nat, I'm so sorry. I had no idea he would say that. Please talk to me. I love you. That's all that matters. But it wasn't all that mattered, and we both knew it. 3 days later, Marcus showed up at my office. My assistant tried to stop him, but he pushed past her into my private office, looking like he hadn't slept since that dinner. Nat, please, just listen to me. I closed the door, giving him privacy he probably didn't deserve. I'm listening. I told him off. I haven't spoken to him since that night. I'm done letting him control my life. Marcus, I mean it. I don't care about the company, the money, any of it. I care about you. We can make our own way. I'll get a job, a real job, not just sitting on the board of directors. We'll build something together, away from all of this. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him so badly. But I'd seen the fear in his eyes when his father spoke, the way he'd hesitated before standing up for me. Do you know what your father is planning? I asked quietly. Marcus blinked. What do you mean? For the company's 75th anniversary gala, the one scheduled for 6 months from now. How did you? Because my company is coordinating it, Marcus. We've been working on it for 3 months. Your father hired us personally. He never knew I worked there, never bothered to ask about my actual job or my actual life. To him, I was just the girl from the Bronx, nothing more. Marcus's face went white. Oh my God. Nat, you have to understand. I understand perfectly. Your father has been planning this gala for months. It's going to be the social event of the season, 500 guests, a live orchestra, celebrity performers, a $15,000 per plate charity auction. He's trying to establish himself as the next chairman of the Metropolitan Arts Council. This event is everything to him. Then and I'm the lead coordinator, Marcus. Every contract, every vendor, every detail goes through me and my signature. Your father has been emailing me for months. He just never connected Natalie Morrison, senior event coordinator, with that girl my son is dating. To him, I was invisible, beneath notice. Understanding dawned in Marcus's eyes, followed by something that looked like panic. Nat, what are you going to do? I looked at the man I'd loved for 18 months, the man who'd told me I was his future, who'd promised me that love was enough. The man who'd let his father call me street garbage and had only found his voice after the moment had passed. I'm going to do my job with absolute professionalism, I said quietly. And then I'm going to make a decision about my own future, one that doesn't depend on anyone else's approval. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have right now. Please go, Marcus. He left, and I sat alone in my office, staring at the thick file labeled Thornton Industries' 75th Anniversary Gala. Inside were months of planning, contracts worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, and the reputation of one of New York's most powerful men. I didn't want revenge. I'd never been that person. But I also couldn't pretend that nothing had happened, that those words hadn't cut straight through to my soul, that years of hard work and dignity could be dismissed so casually by someone who'd never struggled for anything in his life. The next morning, I called an emergency meeting with my boss, Patricia Chen, the owner of Prestige Events. Natalie, you look exhausted, she said, concern evident in her voice. Is everything all right? I told her everything, about Marcus, about the dinner, about Richard Thornton's words, about how I couldn't continue coordinating an event for a man who viewed me as beneath contempt. Patricia listened without interrupting, her expression growing darker with each detail. When I finished, she was silent for a long moment. You want to pull out of the contract, she finally said. I know it's unprofessional. I know it would hurt the company, but Patricia, I can't stand in front of that man and smile and make his dream event come true while knowing what he thinks of me. Patricia leaned back in her chair, studying me. Do you know why I hired you, Natalie? I shook my head. Because when you came to your interview, you had 3 jobs. You were working part-time at a catering company, freelancing as a graphic designer, and taking night classes to finish your business degree. You were exhausted, but your portfolio was flawless. Your references were glowing, and you had this fire in your eyes, this determination. You reminded me of myself 20 years ago. She stood and walked to the window overlooking Manhattan. I came from nothing too, Taiwanese immigrant parents who worked in garment factories. I built this company from scratch, and people like Richard Thornton, old money, old prejudices. They tried to keep me out, but I didn't let them, and I didn't compromise who I was to earn their respect. She turned back to me. The Thornton contract is worth a lot of money, Natalie, but it's not worth your dignity. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to honor every detail of our contract, every clause, every requirement. We're going to deliver exactly what Richard Thornton paid for. and then we're going to let him make his own choices. I didn't understand what she meant until she handed me a revised contract. It outlined everything we'd agreed to provide, with one addition: a standard clause that our firm reserved the right to refuse service to any client who created a hostile or discriminatory environment for our staff. We're within our rights to invoke this clause, Patricia said, but we won't. Not yet. We're going to fulfill our obligations, and then, right before the gala, we're going to give Mr. Thornton a choice. He can issue a formal public apology for his discriminatory remarks, or we can exercise our termination clause. The choice will be entirely his. Patricia, if we pull out that close to the event, it would be devastating. No other firm could pull together something that complex on short notice. His gala would be ruined, his reputation damaged, his bid for the Arts Council chairmanship dead in the water. But that's his choice to make, not ours. We're not seeking revenge. We're simply requiring basic respect. Over the next 5 months, I threw myself into making the Thornton Gala absolutely perfect. Every detail was flawless. I negotiated with vendors, coordinated with the venue, managed timelines. I communicated with Richard Thornton exclusively through email, keeping everything professional and documented. Marcus tried to contact me dozens of times. I didn't respond. What was there to say? He'd chosen to stay in his father's world, and I'd chosen to build my own path. The fact that those paths had intersected in such a painful way was nobody's fault, or perhaps it was everyone's. Then, 2 weeks before the gala, Patricia and I requested a meeting with Richard Thornton. He met us at his office in Midtown, a corner suite on the 45th floor with views of Central Park. He barely glanced at me when we entered, directing all his attention to Patricia. "Ms. Chen, I hope there's no problem with the arrangements. The gala is less than 2 weeks away." "No problems with the arrangements, Mr. Thornton. Everything is proceeding exactly as planned." Patricia slid a document across his desk. "However, we need to discuss a contractual matter." He frowned, scanning the document. "What is this?" "It's the non-discrimination clause in our contract, the one that allows us to terminate service if a client creates a hostile environment for our staff." Richard's eyes flickered to me for the first time, and I saw the moment recognition hit him, truly hit him. His face went from confusion to realization to something darker. "You've got to be kidding me. I assure you, Mr. Thornton, we take discrimination very seriously. You made certain remarks to Ms. Morrison, who, as you now know, is the lead coordinator for your event, remarks that were both unprofessional and deeply offensive. That was a private family dinner. That was a display of character, Mr. Thornton, and it's not behavior we tolerate from our clients." Patricia's voice was steel wrapped in silk. "However, we're not here to cancel your event. We're here to offer you a choice. You can issue a formal public apology to Ms. Morrison to be published in the Times Society section, acknowledging your discriminatory behavior and committing to better conduct. Or we can exercise our termination clause and withdraw from the contract." The color drained from Richard's face. "You can't. The gala is in 12 days. No one else could." "No, they couldn't," Patricia agreed calmly, "which is why we're giving you this choice now. We're not being vindictive. We're being clear about our standards. We work with clients who treat our staff with respect. The choice is entirely yours." Richard's hands trembled slightly as he set down the paper. For the first time, I saw past the arrogance to the man beneath, someone who'd built his entire identity on his position in society, on being above others, on never having to answer for his actions. "This is blackmail. No, Mr. Thornton, this is consequences. There's a difference." He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something shift in his expression. Not remorse, not yet, but calculation. He was trying to figure out what would cost him more, his pride or his reputation. "I need time to think." "You have 48 hours, Patricia said, standing. "After that, we begin the termination process." We left him there, and I felt something strange as we walked out. Not triumph, but a quiet, steady certainty. I hadn't sought revenge. I hadn't plotted or schemed. I'd simply continued doing my job with excellence while refusing to accept disrespect. The rest was up to him. Marcus called me that night. I answered this time. "Nat, please, my father, he's going crazy. He's talking about suing, about destroying your company. But I know you. I know you didn't do this out of spite. Tell me what you need, please." I need him to acknowledge that what he said was wrong, Marcus. That's all. I'm not asking for money or groveling or anything else. Just acknowledgement, basic human respect. He won't do it. You don't understand. To him, admitting he was wrong publicly, it would destroy everything. He's built his reputation, his social standing. Then I guess he needs to decide what's more important, his pride or his gala. Nat, Marcus, let me ask you something. If the situation were reversed, if someone had called your mother street garbage and you had the power to require an apology, would you hesitate? The silence on the other end told me everything I needed to know. That's what I thought. I said softly, "Goodbye, Marcus." I hung up and turned off my phone. The 48 hours passed. Patricia's phone rang at exactly 5:47 p.m. on the deadline day. She put it on speaker. "Ms. Chen, this is Richard Thornton. Mr. Thornton, have you made your decision?" Another long silence. Then, "I'd like to meet with Ms. Morrison. Alone." "That's not—" "Please," he interrupted, and something in his voice had changed. "I'm not trying to intimidate her or manipulate the situation. I need to speak with her, face to face, if she's willing." I nodded at Patricia. "I'll meet with him. Tomorrow morning. My office." He arrived at precisely 9 a.m., looking like he'd aged 5 years in the past 2 weeks. His suit was immaculate as always, but there were shadows under his eyes, and his usual arrogance seemed to have evaporated. "Thank you for seeing me," he said. And it was perhaps the first genuine thing I'd ever heard him say. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. We sat in silence for a moment. "I called in every favor I had," he finally said. "Tried to find another event company that could pull together something comparable in less than 2 weeks. No one can do it. The gala was my chance to chair the Arts Council. It was going to be my legacy, something beyond just the company. I know. My son thinks I'm a monster. My wife hasn't spoken to me in weeks. Emily, my daughter, she told me I'm a bully and a bigot. And the worst part is—" He looked up at me, and I saw something raw in his eyes. "The worst part is they're right." I didn't say anything. This wasn't my moment to make easy. I grew up believing certain things, he continued. That success was about bloodlines and breeding, that the world had an order, and people who disrupted that order were somehow lesser. I know how that sounds. I know what I am. Why are you telling me this? Because I've spent the last 2 weeks trying to find a way out of this that let me keep my pride intact. Some loophole, some angle. But there isn't one. And somewhere in all that scheming, I actually looked at the work you've done for this gala. Really looked at it. He pulled out a folder. I recognized it as the comprehensive planning document I'd prepared. "This is extraordinary, Ms. Morrison. The attention to detail, the vendor negotiations, the contingency planning. You've thought of things my own staff never would have considered. You've created something magnificent." He paused. "My son tried to tell me. He said you were brilliant, accomplished, that you'd built yourself from nothing into something remarkable. But I didn't want to hear it, because admitting that would mean admitting I was wrong about everything. Mr. Thornton, I called you street garbage." The words seemed to physically pain him. I looked at a woman who'd worked 3 jobs to put herself through school, who'd become one of the top event coordinators in New York, who'd done more with less than I've ever had to do in my life. And I dismissed you as garbage because you didn't come from the right zip code. What does that make me? I took a breath. It makes you someone who made a terrible mistake. Whether it makes you a terrible person depends on what you do next. He nodded slowly. "The apology, in the Times. I'll do it. But I want you to know it's not just because I need this gala. It's because I've spent 2 weeks facing something I should have faced a long time ago. I'm not a good person, Ms. Morrison, but maybe I can be a better one." The apology ran 3 days later, in the society section of the New York Times, right where everyone in Richard Thornton's social circle would see it. I recently made remarks to someone that were discriminatory, cruel, and beneath the standards I claim to uphold. I judged Ms. Natalie Morrison based solely on her background, rather than her character, accomplishments, or abilities. In doing so, I revealed my own prejudices and small-mindedness. Ms. Morrison has demonstrated more grace and professionalism in the face of my behavior than I showed in making those remarks. I apologize unreservedly and publicly acknowledge that I was wrong. I hope to learn from this experience and do better. We all should. Richard Thornton. The fallout was immediate. The society pages buzzed with speculation. Some people praised Richard's humility. Others quietly blacklisted him for admitting weakness, but something unexpected happened too. Other people, people who'd faced similar discrimination, started sharing their own stories. The conversation shifted from gossip to something more meaningful. The gala itself was perfect: 500 guests, a 30-piece orchestra, performances by two Grammy winners, and a charity auction that raised $2.3 million. Richard Thornton gave a speech about second chances and the importance of judging people by their character. He mentioned me by name, thanking me for my exceptional work and for teaching him something about dignity. I stood in the back of the ballroom, watching it all unfold, and felt peace. Not because Richard had been humiliated or brought low, but because the truth had simply been told. No revenge, no elaborate scheming, just dignity, persistence, and the natural consequences of actions. Marcus found me there, looking uncertain. "Hey," he said softly. "Hey, it's beautiful. Everything you created. It's beautiful. Thank you." Nat, Marcus, don't. I turned to face him. "You're a good person, but you weren't strong enough when I needed you to be, and I'm not sure you ever will be. Not with me, not in that world. And that's okay. We can acknowledge that and move on. I love you. I know you do. But love isn't always enough. Sometimes people's worlds are just too different, and trying to bridge that gap breaks everyone involved." He nodded, tears in his eyes. "You're going to do amazing things, Natalie Morrison." "I already am," I said gently. He left, and I stayed for the rest of the gala, watching the culmination of months of work. Patricia found me near the end of the night. "You did good, kid." "We did good," I corrected. "What's next for you?" I thought about my tiny apartment in Queens, about my mother who'd raised 3 kids on a nurse's salary, about every person who'd ever looked at my background and assumed it defined my limitations. I said slowly, "it's time I started my own company, Morrison Events, specializing in giving opportunities to coordinators from unconventional backgrounds, people who understand that excellence isn't about where you started, it's about how hard you're willing to work and how much integrity you bring to the table." Patricia smiled. "You'll be my biggest competition." I learned from the best. 6 months later, Morrison Events held its opening reception in a modest office in Brooklyn. Richard Thornton sent flowers and a note. "Thank you for the lesson. Thank you for the grace. Wishing you every success." I kept the note but donated the flowers to a hospital, the same hospital where my mother had worked for nearly 3 decades. Standing in that office, surrounded by my small team of coordinators, each one with a story of overcoming, each one with something to prove, I thought about that dinner, about those cruel words, about how easy it would have been to seek revenge or let bitterness consume me. But karma isn't about revenge. It's about truth catching up with people, about consequence flowing naturally from actions. Richard Thornton hadn't been destroyed, he'd been changed, forced to confront his own prejudices, to grow in ways he never would have otherwise. And me? I'd learned that my worth wasn't dependent on anyone's approval, that I could stand in the face of contempt and let my work speak for itself. That street garbage was just the ignorant opinion of a frightened man who'd built his identity on false superiority. I'd come from nothing, and I'd built something beautiful, not out of spite, but out of strength, not through revenge, but through resilience. And in the end, that was the best justice of all. My mother visited the new office that first week. She stood in the doorway, looking around with tears in her eyes. "Your father would be so proud," she whispered. "I'm proud too, Mommy," I said, hugging her tight, "of where we came from and what we've become, all of it." Because that was the truth Richard Thornton had never understood. Our beginnings don't diminish us, they forge us, and sometimes the people who dismiss us as garbage are the ones who end up learning they never should have underestimated the strength it takes to rise from nothing. That's not revenge. That's just karma doing what it does best, reminding us all that truth, dignity, and resilience always win in the end.